you all are going to stay in the house until we have a vaccine. It's not going to be safe to come out. And that is a tremendous power to tell people they have to wait and do that until you get the vaccine. Now, you know what? I think there is a struggle between two different ways to handle this quarantine. And everybody's saying, listen to the scientists. But there's a flaw there, which is the scientists can tell you, they can model how many people are going to die from coronavirus using different scenarios. You know, if we all go back to work tomorrow, here's how many people die. If we all stay locked up for 6 months, here's how many people. And they can do that probably pretty well. Number one, isolation kills lots of people. It kills people through depression, it kills people through mistakes, it kills people from not getting, routine medical care. It kills people a lot of different ways, but also unemployment kills people. So there's a really good 1982 book that's considered authoritative. And that book did all of the modeling on historical unemployment rates. And this was a long time ago, so our population has almost doubled since then. But what that book found is that for every point in unemployment, if there's 37,000 people die. 9,000 people die from heart attacks, 900 people die from suicides, all these different reasons that they die. And then 3,300 people go to prison for every 1 point, and an extra 4,000 people end up in mental institutions. And instead, CNN reports every year that the flu deaths in this country were between 60,000 and 90,000. And they'll say it's worse than ever. It could be 95,000 deaths this year from flu. Take your flu shot. And if you go around and ask people, do you actually know anybody who's ever died of the flu? Most people will tell you no. If 95,000 people were dying every year of flu, we'd all know people who died of the flu. The truth is, at the year they said 95,000, which was 2 years ago, there were 2,000 people who died of the flu. The average death rate for the flu over the past 20 years is around 1,000 people a year. And what they do is they conflate the mortality and morbidity data for pneumonia with the flu. And only 7% of pneumonia cases are actually caused by the flu, of pneumonia deaths. The rest of them are non-flu or respiratory infections. So CNN just lies about that every year, and I don't think Sanjay Gupta and Anderson Cooper actually want to lie, but it's part of their gestalt that they're supposed to push the flu vaccine. They're supposed to scare the hell out of everybody and make everybody think they're going to die if they don't get it. Well, they do that, and the fact is that the flu does not kill that many people in this country. It's not a dangerous disease, and the flu vaccine caused a lot more harm than the flu does. The third leading cause of death in this country is pharmaceutical drugs. So they're not making us healthier. We have the most aggressive vaccine schedule in the world in this country, and we have the worst health in our children and adults. We have the worst infant mortality. If you look at any of the metrics, the US, I think, is 72 in the infant mortality in the world. We're around Syria and Costa Rica. And when I was a kid, we were number one on all of those. We were the best, we're the healthiest people in the world, the best healthcare system. Today, we're paying the most money for the worst outcomes, and a lot of that is because pharmaceutical advertisements, not only do they advertise on TV, but they control content. And my family, I worked for hundreds of hours when I was in high school at Waseca Home for the Retarded, because it was a central preoccupation of my family, children, particularly with intellectual disabilities. I had a lot of exposure to it, but it's not where I wanted to spend my life, a lot of empathy. I really was committed to spending my life trying to clean up rivers and clean energy and those issues. One of these women came to my home in the summer of 2004 with a big pile of scientific studies. about 18 inches thick, and she put it on my front porch. She was a psychologist from Minnesota named Sarah Bridges. She had a child who had gotten autism from vaccines, had actually gotten a $20 million award from the vaccine court, which recognized that his autism had come from the vaccines. She brought that, she didn't want it to happen to any other kids. She brought me this big pile of scientific studies, and she said, I'm not leaving here until you read these. Now, I'm very accustomed to reading science. I've brought over 500 successful lawsuits in my career. Almost all of them involve some kind of scientific controversy. So I actually started, I'm not going to say I read all the studies cover to cover, but I read the abstracts for all of them, which is the summary at the beginning of the study. And before I was 6 inches into that pile, I was already dumbstruck by the huge delta between what the actual published peer-reviewed science was saying and what the public health regulators were telling the public and doctors and everybody else about the safety of vaccines. And I realized that there was a real problem, and that these vaccines in our country, unlike other medicines, are never safety tested. People find that astonishing. The reason for that is an artifact of CDC's legacy as the Public Health Service. That was the predecessor agency to CDC. The Public Health Service was a quasi-military agency, which is why people at CDC still have military ranks, like Surgeon General, etc. And the vaccine program was initially launched as a national security defense against a biological attack on our country. So the regulators and the Pentagon wanted to make sure that if the Russians attacked us with anthrax or some other biological agent, they could quickly fabricate and deploy a vaccine to 200 million people without regulatory impediments. And so they said, if we call it a medicine, we're going to have to safety test it, and that usually takes 2 to 5 years. Well, let's call it something else. We'll call it a biologic, and then we will exempt biologics from having to do safety testing. So the industry, the 4 companies that make all 72 vaccines that are currently mandated for our children, I've got another gift that has contributed to the lack of safety assessments and lack of safety concerns with vaccines. And that is, in 1986, there was a vaccine. I got 3 vaccines when I was a kid. By 86, there was about 11 of them. And one of them was called the diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, or the DTP vaccine. And it was killing lots and lots of children, and it was causing brain damage in a tremendous number of children. And the industry was getting sued. Wyeth, which is now called Pfizer, went to Congress and said, we are getting out of the vaccine industry because we're paying $20 in damages for every $1 we make from this vaccine. And you cannot make a vaccine safely. You cannot, it is impossible to make a vaccine that's completely safe. You are going to injure a certain amount of people, and the injuries are going to be grievous enough that nobody will ever make any money on vaccines because they're going to have to pay more in injuries, and we can't make them better. And we're going to get out of the industry altogether and stop making vaccines unless you give us complete blanket immunity from liability. So Congress was a Democratic Congress, Republican President Reagan, all of them taking lots of money from these pharmaceutical companies, the #1 contributor, passed a law in 1986 called the Vaccine Act, or VICA, which gave blanket immunity. So no matter how grievous your injury or your child's injury, no matter how toxic the ingredient, no matter how sloppy the line protocols, no matter how negligent that company, you cannot sue them or redress. So there's no discovery, there's no depositions, there's no medical malpractice, there's no class actions. There's zero consequence if they kill you or if they injure you for life.